Hello, it's Keith here. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. We're going to be looking at my X68 computer. Now I bought this second hand, and when I bought it I didn't know anything about it and how it should work normally. So over the last couple of months, firstly I had to repair it, and that was primarily by replacing the internal power supply with a Pico 80X power supply. And then from then I've had to work out how to create floppy disks for it and how to get a HXC disk emulator connected to it, because I had no floppy disks for it. But there's also some various other quirks with it with regards to the screen display and even the keyboard, would you believe. So today we're going to have a look at the machine. I'm going to talk through the hardware I've got, the problems I've had, the solution to those problems, and just generally look at the machine and how you would go about setting one up and repairing one. The reason we're doing this today is I've actually got a second one on order now that is also broken and hopefully in the same way as this one was, and I'm hoping I can talk through repairing it from start to finish. However, if it turns out that that's damaged beyond repair, I still wanted to make this video talking through a working machine and what the normal operation of the machine was, so that you would have an idea to try it out yourselves. Well, firstly, you may have never even heard of the X68000. Well, what is it? Well, basically, the X68000 is a kind of PC-based device. It's a tower machine that was designed as an equivalent to a PC. It uses the 68000 CPU like the Amiga or the Atari ST. However, the X68000 has a big difference over those machines. It has a very powerful internal graphics card. And what they essentially did is they took the graphics card, and I believe also the sound chip, straight off a arcade machine and put it into the X68000. So the X68000 can run arcade conversions of games like the New Zealand Story and Bubble Bobble and Gradius that are basically converted directly from the arcade with really no alteration of the functionality at all. They're just converted for the disk system essentially. So it's a very easy way, just like the Neo Geo is, of getting arcade style functionality in a home package. Now the X68000 is quite expensive if you buy a complete working one. You will pay about 80,000 yen, which is about £800. So I actually paid £200 for my broken one, but I have had to buy some other accessories to get it into working state, and we'll talk through those as well. So anyway, let's have a look at the hardware I've got today. Okay, so you'll have to excuse the mess of the desk here, but I had to get everything on I wanted to talk about today. So you can see the X68000 here, which was this is the one you actually saw in the photo I just showed on screen. So what else have we got? Well, first and foremost, we've got the keyboard. Now, when I bought the machine, it just came without the keyboard, so I just had the base unit. You do really need a keyboard if you're going to do, well, basically anything, because I had to make discs in DOS. You can't operate DOS without a keyboard. If you've got a working one and you've got games to play, then yes, you could just get away with a joypad. This is an MSX joypad. It supports MSX joypads, and I believe in some cases it supports the Genesis 6-button joypads as well. But an MSX joypad's all you need. But as I say, if you've not got working discs, if you're going to want to do some playing around with it, you've got to get a keyboard. The keyboard and the mouse came as a pair. They cost me 15,000 yen, which is about £140 or something like that. The mouse was only 5,000 yen, which is about £40, something like that. I've never used the mouse. You do need it for like the Human 68, which is the kind of Windows operating system, but that doesn't particularly interest me. So it was there, so I snapped it up quickly. But I've not needed this yet. But I've definitely needed this, and I've definitely needed this. Fortunately, of course, my MSX joypad's pretty cheap. So here's a game I've got for it, the New Zealand Story. So the games all come on 5 1/4 discs. This is the first generation model. Actually, that's not true. This is the second generation model. This is called the ACE. So the first generation and the second generation are almost identical. The later generations did use 3.5-inch discs, but the vast majority of the games come on 5 1/4, so you'd probably want to avoid those. One problem with the earlier generations, though, is a lot of the games do need 2 megabytes of memory, and I've only had 1 megabyte. Most of the early games you'll be fine on, but some of the later games, and especially Cotton, which is one of the ones I'm interested in playing, will not load without 2 megabytes of memory, and that comes to something I've bought that's just arrived today. Now this is an unofficial clone memory upgrade, so this is a modern recreated memory upgrade. It's much smaller than the originals, and so this is a memory upgrade for the machine I've got here, the ACE, or at least hopefully it is. I haven't tested it yet. But if you've got the original model, it's a different memory upgrade. So they may look identical, but apparently they are different. So actually the connector's completely different. So there you go. So the connector's actually different. So yes, you definitely need to match the memory upgrade with the machine. You'll be okay if you've got only 1 megabyte, but really if you get the chance, you want to get 2 megabytes, because the vast majority of people nowadays do have 2 megabytes. I did see a poll online recently. So there's the sort of pre-mastered 5 1/4 discs. That aside, you can make your own. I've got this box of floppy disks. They're these M256 HD disks. It's 1.2 megabytes per disk. The double density disks don't work. It can only format high density. And so I made a boot disk here. How did I do that? Because I had no boot disk to get to DOS. Well, what I did is I've made this monstrosity here. It's a 37-pin breakout connector here, and I've connected it via various wires here, and I'll put a link to this because I found it online, and I've connected it to the HXC. Well, why don't I use the HXC for everything, you might think? Well, unfortunately the HXC doesn't work very well with these machines. The machines have added intelligence to the 5 1/4 floppy drives. They've got soft eject buttons, eject motors, and other disk sensors in them. So if you try and run a game off the HXC, you will usually find it won't load properly, because halfway through it'll get stuck and will not function. And one of the reasons my boot disk differs from the human DOS 2 disk that it was based on is I've taken off the graphical user interface, because it took so long. You would come back half an hour later, it hadn't loaded yet because of that missing functionality. But this basic boot disk, even from the HXC, would load in just a few minutes. So yes. So I will show you how I do that later. But essentially, you plug this into the external port. I've got the pins jumpered up, so this appears as disk 3 or disk 4 maybe. It appears as drive C on the machine, and drives A and B are the internal ones. So this allows me to copy a disk image from the drive C to a real floppy disk. And I will show you later how to make a clone of the New Zealand story disks if the ones you've got are damaged and you need to work from a disk image using the HXC. So there we go. One other important thing is the video. I'm using a VGA monitor here. The back uses one of these 15-pin ports, so I'm using this converter. However, it's not as easy as just using any old monitor plugged into these machines. These machines have a very strange resolution. They work at 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024. So a lot of monitors don't like it. I usually use my video converter box here with all of my devices, even the V9K, which has a weird video out. Rubbish attached to it. It doesn't work. It doesn't help with this, so I can't use my usual TV with today. I'm using a spare monitor I've got. It's a 1680 by 1024. Is it 768? I forget the resolution of that. But anyway, what I was going to say is it almost works okay for the 512 by 512 mode. But I think if the games use 1024 by 1025, it doesn't work at all. The reason I'm saying that is I tried to use Xenon 2 on it the other day. Couldn't get it to load. The game was loading, the music was playing, couldn't see a thing, and the screen was complaining. One other thing to notice is I said it almost works perfectly with this one in 512. You do lose the bottom line of the screen, and if you're in DOS mode, you'll notice some of the, if you go to the bottom few lines of the screen, you can't see them. So I'll keep having to clear the screen to be able to work in the top 2/3 of the screen that are visible. Not too bad for games. You do notice the few lines missing off the bottom. In Castlevania, I couldn't see the stairs I was trying to go down. But as I say, it's good enough for now, and even the Frame Meister, I think, doesn't fix it. It's it's a very problematic signal. So, but one thing that I would suggest worth considering, I've tried this on sort of 2 other monitors, 2 full HD monitors that I have mounted vertically, so I can't use them for this. But in one of them it didn't work at all, and on the other one it worked perfectly. Now, one of the problems I was having with this machine when I got it is I thought it was completely dead because the screen wasn't coming on, not realizing about these strange graphics modes. But actually it was just the screen I was using just didn't like it, and I tried a second screen, this full HD one. That didn't work either, and I thought, no, it's definitely dead. And then I thought, well, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. I tried it on the third one, and it worked perfectly. So it seems like even that second full HD monitor had trouble. Now this comes into something else that I want to show you. I actually, on a bit of a sort of whimsy, I bought these VGA to DVI converters, and while they don't help with my little TV, I have actually managed to get one of the full HD monitors that refused to show it working by plugging the X68 into this VGA port and then the HDMI into the monitor. So these did get one of my other machines working okay. 2 of these 3 work, I believe. But as I say, they're vertically mounted, so that's why I'm not using them today. And these were really cheap. These were like £10 each. So if you've not got many monitors and you want to get it working on one, I'd firstly recommend Full HD if you can get one. But as I say, it might be worth buying those cheap converters to try and get your non-working monitor to work with the X68. So that's the introduction then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to plug the machine, we're going to switch the machine on, and we're going to have a look at what the LED lights do on the front of the display and what the display shows, so that if you're in the same situation as me and you've got a monitor that doesn't work with the device, you at least know what the normal functionality of the device is going to be, and that will hopefully help you troubleshoot your situation, and unlike me thinking the machine was completely dead when actually it was functioning normally and my screen just wasn't working. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so one thing I forgot to say, I mentioned the expense of the keyboard and the mouse. They are not PS2 keyboards and mice, they're completely different. You can get converters, but the converters cost almost as much as the keyboard does. The converter for the mouse, which is different to the mouse, costs twice what I paid for this mouse, and the converter for the keyboard costs 2/3 of what I paid for the keyboard. So yeah, that's something important to say. Now, replacing the power supply, the voltages it uses are the same as an ATX one. The colouring is different. I will link in the colouring conversion that someone made. But the difficult thing is the power button. On a PC, when you press the power button, it connects a signal to tell the power supply to turn on. On the X68, it disconnects the signal to turn the machine on. So if you wire up an ATX power supply like I did in the early days of testing it, without the signal connected, it will immediately turn on, which isn't a problem as long as you know that's what it's going to do. So I've got a power brick at the back here, which is going to power the machine via its Pico ATX power supply that it now runs from. So let's plug that in and we'll see what happens. So that's quite curious. The machine has actually switched itself on automatically. I actually removed the internal battery from this as part of repairing it because they're prone to leaking. It's got one of these solid-state batteries soldered to the motherboard. So I've taken that out, so I'm surprised it decided to turn itself on. But let's turn it off anyway. So if I just press the power button here. So the power light is now flashing, which means it's shutting down. It takes a little time to shut down. The reason for that is that the floppy drives, it's programmed to tell the floppy drive to eject and wait until they reply that they have ejected before it shuts the machine off. So the power light is now red. There's no other lights on the machine. As I said before, I'm trying to make this very clear because when I bought this, I had no idea what the lights were supposed to do, so I didn't know what normal functionality was. So I've pressed the power button, the machine is now off. So I press the power button now. This will effectively disconnect the electricity to the power signal inside the power supply. So as I said before, if you're using an ATX power supply and you've not connected the signal, the button to the signal via an inverter, which is how this works now, if you're just plugging the electrical wires and the power button signal isn't connected, it will immediately switch on, and this is what happens. So the light has gone green, the high resolution is now red. Now the disk drive 1 is flashing on and off green. It can go red, but it isn't. Red means reading. So disk 2 has done nothing. Disk 1 is green. The eject buttons are not lit. The high frequency is lit. The timer is not lit, and the power is lit. And you should see this insert disk screen here in Japanese. As I said though, when I got this, I had no screen that was working, so all I had was the LEDs to go on. So this is normal operation. So let's put something in. First of all, let's put a blank disk in. So this is a blank disk. It's been formatted, but it has nothing on it, so the machine will not be happy with this. So I've put the disk in. The light is now just flickered red and then immediately spat out, and it's complained about the disk, saying it can't find a boot sector. So let's just try putting that in disk 2 just to see what happens. So disk 1 it briefly went black, disk 2 went red, which means reading, but again it's not happy with that disk, so it spat it out. Now, New Zealand Story comes on 2 disks. One is marked A, one is marked B. Let's put disk A in drive B and see what happens. So now disk 1 is black, disk 2 has gone red, and the eject light has gone green. So now it is trying to load the game. Now, the system is quite clever. It can work with, I believe, up to 4 floppy drives. The external one seems to always take C, but as I say, I've put the disk in the wrong drive here, but it does seem to cope okay. I've actually left the second disk out, which it will be expecting to be in, and so I've got an error message. So really what I should have done here is, played by the rules. So there's a reset button on the top, so we'll just press that. and we'll just eject our floppy disk. So we'll put this in the correct drive this time, the drive 0 on the left, put the second disk in drive 1 as it's marked. And so now the two eject lights are green, the red light means it's reading here on disk 1, and disk 2, disk B side, that is green because it's not reading from that one yet. And now the game should load okay. It does have internal speakers, so let's turn the volume up a little bit. Now we get a loading screen because, of course, although the game is basically the same as the arcade, it does take longer to load. One other reason you will need a keyboard is, although some of the games don't need one, some of the games, when it says at the start, you know, press start button, insert coins kind of thing, you do have to press like the F1 key or the 1 key or something like that. So if you've got no keyboard, you might not be able to start some of the games. But anyway. So yeah, as I say, from the point of view of repairing this, all I had to do was cut out the battery before it leaked. It hadn't leaked, but they're notoriously bad, and replace the power supply, which it's now running off a Pico ATX, but in the early days I just tested it with a full ATX power supply. What I did is I bought an extension for an internal ATX power supply. Just an extension lead, cut it in half and then soldered to that so I could test, and then once I was happy the machine was worth it, I bought the Pico ATX power supply, which cost about £60, but maybe you can get them cheaper. I bought one that the reviews on Amazon said worked with this machine, because these are very popular in Japan, so there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing as I'm doing, so you know, someone vouching for one Pico ATX power supply versus a cheaper one that no one was vouching for, it was more sensible to buy the better one that people had said worked. So okay, here's the game starting then. But we don't need to see that. So the machine's now shutting down, so the power light flashed briefly, and it's now shut down. Now, this is a copy of the Human 68 disc. This is the operating system disc for these machines. The machine should have come with one, but whoever owned this before me nicked it. They also nicked the internal memory upgrade because the memory slot is obviously quite seriously scrapped, so it obviously had one in at some point, but it's not there now. So I made this by using originally I used an emulator on the PC, created a disk image on the PC that was a minimal version of this, because as I said, if I run this off a disk image, it takes over 30 minutes to start and may even never start, because I've had a lot of trouble, as I said before, with the disk images from the HXC, but copying from a HXC to a real disk image works just fine. So I used the image of this disk on the PC emulator to make this simpler version, which just has the boot sector files and also a few other files for formatting disks. So this is a minimal version of this, you could argue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to make a minimal disk from this one, and it's so effectively how to make a simple DOS boot disk. So let's now I'm going to need my mouse this time, because Human 68 boots to a graphical user interface by default. We don't want the graphical user interface, but that's what it boots to. So as I've said, you can do this work on your emulator and then save the resulting disk image via HXC and then boot to that disk image from your external device, which I showed you before, which is just a HXC wired up to the external port, which appears as drive C. So now you can see I've got my mouse cursor. Now you might be able to tell, you might not, but there's some stuff missing off the bottom. Not too much, but there is some stuff. So, but at least it works, because as I said, that Xenon 2 did not. Now I'm going to run this Command X file, and that's the DOS prompt, because I don't want to use that graphical user interface. So now I've got my command line. So let's learn how to take a blank disk and make it into a DOS disk that we can boot from. Because as I said, the Human 86 is no good for booting from the external device because it will be just too slow. So let's put our disk in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to format our disk. So the command is format. A lot of the commands are actually the same as on a PC, but some of them do work slightly differently. So we're going to format drive B, because that's where I've put my disk. So we get some Japanese here. It says drive B. Please put a high density disk in drive B, because it can't format double density. I've tried, it does not work. So please press a key. So after pressing key, and now it's formatting. And you can see the red light is flashing on drive B. So now what we need to do is we need to set up our B drive as a bootable disk. And so what we do to do this is we do sys b:. And what this does is it copies from the boot disk to the B drive, and it will copy the basic system files that we need to do to get the disk started, but it doesn't really copy enough. So if we now look at our B drive, b:, and then do dir, well, we can't actually see any files here because it's only copied the hidden file. It doesn't really copy enough to get us going in DOS. So if we now go to the A drive again, and we do copy, if we just have a look at what's here. So we've got config sys, key sys, UK startup, autoexec, bat, command X, VSX, X files are executable files, and you can see we've gone off the screen. So if we just do a CLS to get us back to the top of the screen, and what I'm going to do is do copy A:* star B:. So now it's copying config sys, key sys, uskcg.sys, startup end, autoexec bat, command.x. So there we go, it's copied all the files from the root directory. I don't know a way of copying all the folders. I know a way of copying disk images, but as I said, we don't want the files relating to this booting to the GUI because it's too slow. So now if we go into bin, this is where the DOS programs would be, so to speak. So what we want is we want disk copy, that's an important one. And we also want switch, I believe. So let's do copy, so let's do a CLS, copy disk copy .x to B, copy switch .x to B. Well, you could copy all of these, but I'm only copying the very few I want. Now what's switch? Well, I'll show you in a moment. But and the other one we want to do is copy sys.x to B, just in case we want to make more system disks later. Now, if I've done it right, we should now be able to eject this disk. So I'm taking out the human boot disk that we started the machine from, and if we reset now, so now the system is now loading from the B disk, and we'll just see if I've got enough files. So it's complaining it can't find, because I haven't edited the batch file, so it's saying it can't find the other drivers that it was expecting to load, and we may need those depending on what we're doing. But from the point of view of getting the machine to boot to DOS, to be able to copy files, that should be enough. Okay, as a result of chronic stupidity, I've forgotten a file from the disk. We need the format command, so I'm just going to put my floppy disk back in, put it in the right way with the label pointing to the left hand side of the machine. And let's do copy B:, E:/ bin / format.x A:. Now you may think these are yen symbols, and you're correct. On these old PCs and on PCs in general, often you see the yen symbol is the slash, because when they converted the ASCII character set, they stole the slash symbol for the yen that only Japan needs. So now I've got my format command. Hopefully my new boot disk is a bit more usable. So let's take human68 back out and put that away before I ruin it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to copy some disks. Now you saw my copy of New Zealand story earlier, but let's suppose something went wrong with my copy of New Zealand story and I needed to create a new one. Well, what I can do is I can clone the images from the HXC external floppy drive onto real floppy disks, and then hopefully I can boot the game from the fake floppy disks, and that will allow me to keep playing the game. What we need to do first is we can use the disk copy command to clone the disks, but we actually need to clone to formatted disks. This is a mistake I made early on, and I couldn't clone to the formatted disks, to the unformatted disks. So let's put the first disk in, and let's do a CLS so we get back to the top of the screen and do format B:, and it says please press a key. It's going to format floppy disk B, so we'll just do that. Now, in the early days, I had some wiring problems on my HXC, and when I was doing the disk copies, both drives seemed to be connected as drive A. So I was trying to do the copy from C to A, and I was actually copying over A itself and reformatting it. So I think it's now set as drive 3, but I'm not entirely sure. I might have had some, because I've got a manually wired one, I might have made some other mistake in there. But I did try all kinds of wiring combinations of the ID selects, because the ID selects, there's technically 4 in this, but I'm not quite sure how the external ones are wired. I don't know if the external wired ones are wired so 0 and 1 are now 2 and 3, or whether you have to actually sort of wire the drive itself to identify itself as 2 and 3. But anyway, it's working now, so I'm avoiding messing with it. But so that's the first one formatted. It says, do I want to format another? I will say yes. It ejects the disk for me. Take that disk out, put the other disk back in. This is the second disk I want to format. And it says press a key, so I press a key, and now it's formatting that second disk. You may notice, of course, there's a rather loud whirring noise in here because the fan is part of the power supply, and while I swapped the power supply, I didn't have a replacement fan, so obviously the fan's a little bit worn out. I'll be honest, I tend to play my computers on emulators these days. I do like to see the real hardware working, but it's not like I'm running this thing for hours and hours a day or anything, so the fan doesn't particularly bother me. Maybe I'll try and get a better fan if I manage to get the other one repaired. So as I say, I'm hoping to have 2 working machines at the end of all of this. Do I want to format another one? No, I do not. So now if we go to drive C and do dir, now you can see there's some files here, and what this is the New Zealand story appearing as drive C, which is connected to that external HXC. As I've said before, I won't be able to load the game because it will play up. All of the games play up from the external drive because the HXC doesn't have that emulated extra disk hardware. So what we're going to do, we'll just do another CLS here. We'll do disk, copy, C:A, B:. So B:, is that new blank disk. A is our boot disk, so we're going to copy to our blank disk. Now it says we're going to copy from C to B, press a key, and now it's reading from the HXC. Now the machine has a built-in 1 megabyte of memory, and these are 1.2 megabyte floppy disks, so it can't do it all in one go, so it does it in 2 passes. So it's reading the first part of the floppy disk now, and now it's writing to the floppy disk here. So it says now, do I want to copy another disk? I do, so I will say yes. It's ejected. And now it says it's going to copy from C to B. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting my second disk in drive B. A little handle there. And now I need to change my disk. So I've now changed the New Zealand story disk B in the HXC. I've got the second blank floppy disk in, and now I just press a key again, and it's starting copying that second disk. So there we go, it's copied the second disk. It says, do I want to do another one? So I will say no. And now we're back to the command line. So I'm going to have my second disk in drive B, my first disk in drive A, and now you can see the New Zealand story is booting from the copied disks. So this is how we can get our games working even if our originals are damaged. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to attempt to install this upgrade, and hopefully we'll be able to have 2 megabytes of memory to play all of our games now. So let's take the case out, let's open up the case. Bit violent there. I have to push at the front to get these flaps out of the way, and you can see there's the memory slot here. Now the original memory upgrades were quite long, but thanks to modern technology, not so much. So there we go. There we go. So if we just it's in position and push it down. The original ones had screws to screw in, but they're obviously hoping gravity is going to do the job, and it looks like it probably is. So the machine still boots, so at least that's a start. So we're going to try our Exciting Hour game, which does require 2 megabytes, and let's see what happens. It's a wrestling game, so I think Exciting Hour might be a lie of sorts, because I doubt I will be excited. So it says it's warming up, well, good for it. Oh, it's saying it can't load up. It says I must have 2 megabytes. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means I've played a trick on you, because although I put the memory upgrade in, that's not enough for the machine to know it's got a memory upgrade. So let's put our disk back in that I created earlier. you remember I copied various files to this machine, and one of them was Switch. Now unfortunately it looks like I'm not going to be able to load Switch from this disk because I don't have enough files on it. Switch obviously needs some drivers that come on this disk, come on the master disk that I haven't copied to this version. So being as I don't know what those are, I'm going to load up my original human disk, my human 68 disk, and we'll just endure the startup. Some of the machines have a co-processor, so this one does not, but you can install a floating point mathematics driver. It's saying it needs that driver, so I can copy that driver on later if I want to get this working from my boot disk. But for now, we're just going to load to our human, and we'll human OS, and we'll just return to DOS and run that switch again. Now what Switch does is it's the equivalent of the BIOS settings for a PC, so it has various options, and the only one we're interested in is the memory, because it doesn't auto-detect the memory. We can tell it it's got 2 megabytes and then the game should run. Now on a normal machine that would be stored in memory, but I think because I've cut the battery out of mine, I will probably need to do that every time I have removed the power from the machine. So if we go to command.x here, now we're running Switch again. And this second option, which is very kindly in English, is memory 1024. So if I just press enter here and change it to 248. And then I need to go all the way down to this bottom one, just below next key, which is end. It said to me if I pressed escape it wouldn't save the settings, so that would be a bit of a problem. So it says I've changed the amount of memory, is that okay? So I say yes, and that should be it. So now I'll take out my human 68 disk, put back in my exciting hour, press the reset, and hopefully now we can have our exciting hour. Okay, seeing as exciting hour was on strike, it looks like maybe the disk is faulty. I've got another game ready, so let's see if this one works any better. I've not been able to play this one before because of the lack of memory, but it's quite funny, the LEDs are all flashing on the keyboard in time to the music. And in case you don't know, this is Cotton. Cotton needs a minimum of 2 megabytes, and I believe it's even enhanced for 4 megabytes. The 2 megabyte upgrade, that's 122, a single megabyte upgrade, giving you a total of 2, plugs into the slot I showed you before. Any memory upgrades beyond that, I believe, plug in as kind of like PCI cards into the main card slots, and I think they're actually slow memory. Okay, technical problem, it's showing the out of range signal message on my screen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug one of my other monitors in, and I'm going to change the settings because I've tried this game on an emulator and you can actually select the video options. Unfortunately, maybe they're using 15 kilohertz or something that my monitor can't show. So let's have a go with that. You don't adjust your set. This is the vertical monitor that I use as part of my main PC setup, which is the only one that seems to work with this mode. So let's see what mode it's actually trying to use. So the screen mode is set to 384 by 256 high. So it seems to like 512 by 256 high, or 512 by 256 high. So that's the only option that I seem to have for this monitor. So it looks like it's able to save it to the floppy disk, so at least I won't have this trouble again. I wonder if the game's going to look slightly squashed though. So as I've said before, this probably isn't the ideal CRT to be using with the X68, but generally it works okay, and as I say, it's one of my spare ones because my other ones are used on my main computer. The important thing is though, this game won't load without the 2 megabyte total memory, so the memory upgrade that I've installed into this machine is obviously working okay. And there we go. Well anyway, that's all I was going to show you today. This is the X68, and as you can see, it's, I mean, technically speaking, it's around the same kind of territory as the Super Nintendo or the Neo Geo. The The important thing to bear in mind though is the X68 came out in '86, I believe, so it was many years before the Super Nintendo came out, so it was really ahead of its time, and in my opinion significantly superior to the Amiga, and certainly far better than the Atari ST and the Sega Genesis as well, although those are all great systems. And I'm planning on doing some programming tutorials next year in the same ways I'm doing with my Z80 tutorials. I'm going to start doing X68 tutorials, 68,000 tutorials, sorry, and they're going to cover the Amiga, the Atari ST, the Neo Geo, the Genesis and the X68 that you're seeing here today. So I'm learning about the hardware and how to program it and how to do various graphical and music kind of things with it. So hopefully if you're interested in this machine, you'll follow that series because you'll learn a bit about how the hardware works, and hopefully you'll have some fun with it. If you haven't got a machine and can't get your hands on one, they are very well emulated, so that's also an option for you. You know, go out and have a look. There's some great Windows emulators that honestly play the games just as well as owning the real hardware, and it's not a cheap piece of hardware to own, so you know, I wouldn't blame you if you just use the emulators, because that's how I'm doing my development. Anyway, thanks for watching today, and goodbye.